So real estate's in this weird thing. When the economy's booming, it goes up. When the economy is slowing down because of inflation, the Fed's rising rates, real estate goes up. The only time it's gone down is when there's a global fraud crisis. Hello, and welcome back to the Main Street Patriot Podcast. Here we are, episode 9.
Woo!
How you doing, Jake? With me, as always, my producer, Jake.
Yo, great, Jimmy. Good to be here with you.
Sweet. So today we're going to dive in. We're going to start doing deeper dives into each of the 4 pillars and kind of start explaining how they work, why it's important. That brings me to an important idea, is that no one, to include me, likes the real estate. I think this is a very important concept. No one loves the real estate.
What do you mean by that?
Nobody loves it. They all love what the real estate gets you.
Okay, it's just a tool.
It's just a tool. Like, I think you watch like the HGTV, like flip shows, and they're all lying. Like, I have friends who've done the shows, like the producers lie about the end numbers. I have family members who have done the show, and they lied about the numbers.
Ooh.
And so it's like, just remember, this is simply an asset. It's inanimate. There's no feeling around it other than, hey, you're providing safe, clean housing for other Americans.
Yeah.
But
there's meaning and purpose there.
yeah.
Yeah.
But don't fall in love with the house.
Right.
And so I'm not sure why I started the podcast off with that tangent, other than we're going to dig into the 4 pillars and kind of have a better understanding, because when I just do a brief gloss over, there's still a ton, people still have a ton of questions.
Yeah. Nice. Well, I'm glad you started with that note, because in a sense, the 4 pillars are why you do it. So you have to really understand what these are, how they work, how you can make them work for you.
Yeah, exactly. But before I dig into the first pillar, appreciation, just remember to join our free Facebook group at Ranger Real Estate, How to Get Wealthy on Main Street, where we'll be posting deals, we'll be posting videos, we're posting tips and tricks on how to really grow that passive real estate portfolio.
Nice. Cool.
So the first pillar, it's what everybody's familiar with. This is why they go in the stock market, they buy low, and they sell high, right?
Right.
And so when I show people how to get this 20-unit portfolio, it's, generally I'm going to show them how they can build a unit that's going to be worth $4.6 million one day. Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, and that 4.6 million again is the amount of wealth that they should have in order to draw down a monthly retirement income.
Yeah, so most financial planners in the 4% rule, if you want $10,000 a year for retirement, you're going to have to $10,000 in retirement really means $15,000 because you pay your taxes later in retirement. Most retirement plans, why I don't like them, is they are tax deferred, not tax free. So to get 10, you really need 15. 15 times 12 is $184K. Generally for retirement, you want to save up 25 times the amount that you want to live off of. So 185K times 25 is 4.6 million. So we use real estate to show them how to get to that 4.6 million by buying 20 houses. Now, I messed up the math in the beginning. So eventually you have 20 houses worth 4.6, but what we show you is a plan to do it over 10 years. So generally, you need to buy $140,000 houses, and they'll appreciate to a $230,000 house in 10 years. And you might be saying, well, that's if I buy all 20 this year. That's the first set of modeling. That's what we do. We do then show you how to step it up and what you'll need to do year over year. But so your original purchase price on these assets is 2.8, and they're going to go to 4.6. So over 10 years, you got to ask yourself, hey, Jimmy, are these safe assumptions? Are these reasonable assumptions?
Good question. Thank you, Dwight.
And so I run the numbers running a 5% appreciation. And so if you guys could see this visually, I show a track record of MSNBC and how every fall, so real estate is somewhat seasonal. And every fall, like when you think of Thanksgiving and Christmas, Jake, do you think about celebrating it in a new house or an old house or the house you grew up with?
I guess I picture most the house I grew up with.
Right.
Yeah.
Like no one's excited to move in November and December.
Right.
So you'll see a transaction volume go down.
Yeah.
And we'll see our transactions for buying, they pick up second week of January. And so every fall, the media starts blitzing, oh, we're up for a new crash. And so I have it on my Instagram and my YouTube, some of the headlines from October 2015 to March of 2022. Like there's a headline in the fall that real estate is going to crash, and it doesn't. So, for example, in 2015, the headline, housing today, a larger bubble than 2006. The median home price in the United States was 400 in 2015. It went up to 420, so 5%. 2016, we're in a new housing bubble. Housing went up another 5% in 2016. 2017, home ownership doesn't build wealth, study finds. That is a complete lie. Real estate went up another 6%. 18, it's better to rent than to buy in today's housing market, another 5%, now we started at 400,000. We're up to 491. 2019, housing market is about to shift in a bad way for buyers in another 4%. And then late 2019, next year will be hard on the housing market, especially these big cities. And then what happened in 2020? Housing went up 10%. Then what happened in 2021 with low interest rates? Another 19. Then interest rates cooled. 2020 still went up 6%. 2023 still went up 4%. 2024, the numbers are out, another 4%. So
That's hilarious, especially like that graph you have next to it for those that can't see because they're listening.
yeah,
And like the all the doomsday headlines are alongside like continuously trajectory going up of appreciation.
and then I think that why that happens is because real estate's a long-term asset. And so there might be some dips, there might be some slides, and then there's always something more sexy at the moment, right?
Sure.
And so you might be too young for this, but there was a movie called Can't Hardly Wait.
I don't know that one.
So there was a guy named Freddie Prinze, and he was like the heartthrob when I was in high school, and all the
Okay.
girls loved Freddie Prinze. And Freddie Prinze was the star of this movie.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, so there's two girls. There's like the very attractive like cheerleader girl, and then there's the nice like painter girl in smocks and glasses and the painting smocks.
Yeah.
And so Freddie's friends like convince him to date the nerd.
Uh-huh.
But it turns out, like let's call her Angela. I don't remember what her name was, but
Yeah.
Angela was beautiful on the inside, and it turned out she was also beautiful on the outside once she took off the painting smock and the glasses and she let her hair down.
Yeah.
And so I compare real estate investing to that.
Ah, nice.
There's always going to be like the top cheerleader investment out there.
Right.
But then there's Angela painting away, like beautiful on the inside and the outside. So
I love it.
I've done different presentations where it's can't hardly wait investing. I think real estate is, because in 2023, when interest rates went up, everybody's like, oh, it's over. We're in for a major crash. And I'm like, no, we're not. And I'm going to get into it later in the podcast, why it was very clear there's no way there's a crash coming.
Yeah.
And so
why does the media, because we gave these headlines, why does the media like to go after real estate like this?
because they need clickbait.
Okay.
I think they need clickbait in the fall.
Sure.
So
Sure. Yeah, I guess it is something that affects everybody. Like,
yeah,
oh,
everybody generally has to have
I got a mortgage.
a housing domicile.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. And then I think because of the 2008 crash, it's very clickbaitable. And so let's kind of talk about the 2008 crash, which I think was, or let me finish my thought about, this is either can't hardly wait investing, but I also call it Caddyshack investing. Because real estate investors, they're like Rodney Dangerfield. We get no respect, especially from the media. We get no respect.
Yeah.
Even though it's the greatest wealth producer in this country's history, and from back to your favorite episode, it is a country founded by real estate investors for real estate investors.
That's right. That's right.
And so it's hard to do on the podcast, but one of my favorite slides, and I got this on our YouTube as well, is how would one do this? I guess we could, in the show notes, we'll put a link to the actual visuals of the slides.
Yeah.
Okay. So my next favorite slide is the don't.
Or they can join Ranger Real
they can
Estate.
join Ranger Real Estate, and I'll post that stuff there too.
That's right.
Nice. Great call, Jake. Okay, so then there's the betting against the champ slide. So since 1941, real estate the median home price in the United States has only gone down 6 years. And in those 6 years, 5 of those 6 years were during the Great Recession, 2007 to 2011. The only other year it went down was 1990. And so if you look at this chart, the crazy thing is in high interest rate times, because the economics 101 thing would be, hey, interest rates go up, real estate must go down, right? But that's not what the last 75 years have happened. It's that when interest rates go up, so here was something interesting. We had a hyperinflation in the late 70s, and you can see on this chart between so in 1977, real estate went up 15%, 78, 16%, 79, 14%. Even in 80 and 81, when Paul Volcker was raising rates, real estate still went up 7% and then 5%. And then 1982, when there was a minor recession, 1%. And then 83, 84, back to the 7%.
So you're saying that...
So in the late 70s, when interest rates doubled, guess what housing prices did?
They went up.
They tripled.
Yep. No, triple. Okay.
So, and then, so you gotta, we gotta get into this in another episode, but to be an investor, you gotta understand third and fourth order consequences. Mm-hmm. So the first order consequence most people think when interest rates goes up is pricing must go down, right?
Right.
But why do interest rates generally go up?
Why they generally go up? We were talking about that last time, I guess.
Well, generally rates go up because the Fed is trying to curb inflation.
Right.
What happens to real estate in inflationary environments? It goes up related to the value. So you got these you got a second order consequence. The first order consequence is interest rates are going up, real estate must go down. But you got to step back a second and ask, why are interest rates going up? Well, interest rates generally go up because the Fed's trying to cause inflation. What happens when inflation's out of control is hard assets go up. Commodities go up. What's a house? It's a box of commodities.
Wow. Yeah.
So
a little bit of the paradox.
That's why people come to the Main Street Patriot, so that we can do these little riddles and have these little thought experiments.
Yeah.
So, because in 2023, when everybody's like, there's going to be a crash, I'm like, no, there's not. Inflation's out of control. Real estate's going to boom right now. Mm-hmm. And then, 2020, 2021, I was selling this is just nuts. Super crazy time. When the rates went up, I was like, oh, we're just going from super crazy to still crazy. Like, still crazy good deals. And, like, I can take you back to videos I was making of this. Yeah. Like, there's not going to be a crash. Everybody who has a long-term asset, their assets are going to really rise in value. And in 2023, when things slowed down, I was like, okay, cool. This is your chance to buy. Because in 2020 and 2021, like, everybody was selling to hedge funds.
Right.
And so then the other thing is the people who benefit from low interest rate environments are people who already have houses. If you buy in a low interest rate environment, you're going to pay a lot for that. If you already have assets and they drop, you refi out all your deals. And so that was kind of a 2023 lesson. But back on task about appreciation. I'm going to kind of go where I think these assumptions are safe. So, okay, cool. We got the last 75 years that only in 5 of those years did the median home price in the United States go down. And then generally in times of turbulence, and you can't see this, but in times of hyperinflation, real estate generally goes up because it's a box of commodities. So real estate's in this weird thing. When the economy's booming, it goes up. When the economy is slowing down because of inflation, the Fed's rising rates, real estate goes up. The only time it's gone down is when there are a global fraud crisis. And so here's another interesting thing I like to talk about with people. So I'm not going to be a real estate guru who bags on the stock market, right? It's very safe to say that stock market averages a 10% return.
Yeah.
Not saying anything crazy.
Widely accepted.
If you look from $100 in if you put $100 in the SPX in 1940, it would be worth $632K, not adjusted for inflation. So decent investment, right? Mm-hmm. So nobody's bagging on the SPX, except when you look, what about if it was adjusted for inflation? If you put $100 in the SPX in 1940, it would be worth $28K today when you adjust it for inflation. And so the question is, if the SPX goes up 10% a year and real estate goes up 5% a year, how is real estate the greatest wealth producer in this country's history?
I don't know, Jimmy.
The 4 pillars, player. Because it comes down to leverage once again, right? We went through these numbers. I'll do it real quick on another asset. But if you buy a $100,000 house for cash and it goes up 5%, you have a 5% return. If you buy a $100,000 house and leverage it and you put a 20% down payment and the house goes up $5,000, you have a 25% return. And so, and you combine the cumulative return of the tax returns, the cash flow, and the tenant paying it down, that's how you get to that 30% cumulative return. And that's why people are in real estate, not the SPX. The SPX, you can only win one way.
You got to use your own money.
Yeah, and I do need to run some numbers of, hey, let's say I put $100 in real estate in 1940, what would it be worth? It'd be really hard to calculate because you couldn't calculate the cash flow.
Right.
And the tax advantages. But back to one of my big ideas is it is impossible to become wealthy when you're using your own money because you're left with too little of the taxes. So you have this 70-year trend of a 5% increase in real estate pricing for 70 years, put a lever on that, so that 5% return becomes a 25% return for you year over year over year. That's why you buy real estate. So now let's talk about if we think this 5% is, if we believe it's going to continue, right? So here's 2 reasons, and then this is going to get released probably in February 2020, February 2025. And so the new Trump administration's coming in, and, you know, they are going to try to curb inflation. Here's the bottom line, is in 2020, they printed, let's say there was $100 in the whole economy.
Okay.
It took from the Revolutionary War to 2020 to build $100.
Yeah.
They, out of thin air in 1 year, printed $30. They added so much cash to the economy. Like they were just giving money away with the EIDL loans and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Is that I think it's a generational issue, this inflation. I think the Fed can do a job of making it not hyperinflation, not making it nuts. But this pig is going to take a long time to get through the python.
Right.
I think the Trump administration will do everything responsibly possible to curb inflation, and then unleashing energy again will definitely help it. Because if inflation is measured this way, the amount of currency in the economy divided by the amount of goods, the only way you can lower economy is increase the denominator.
Right.
And so that there's more goods in the economy, and then the amount of currency in the economy slows down, and hopefully the number you're dividing by can catch up. Does that make sense?
Yep, totally. Wow.
Inflation is amount of cash in the economy divided by the goods in the economy. So if you can raise production, you can curb inflation.
Right.
I do think they're going to unleash a bunch of energy policies that will curb inflation instead of just the interest rate.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense.
So, and then remember, the Fed's mandate is to keep inflation increasing by 2% a year. So that's a given that inflation is going to be there and continue to increase.
Right.
And so now I just don't think all the money that got printed in 2020, I think it's going to be at least a 10-year phenomenon. And so now I'm going to get into one last idea on why I think the appreciation is going to be, we have another generational issue. So I doubt you knew this, Jake, but before the crash in 2007, we had 4 million housing units available, and we had a population of 300 million.
Okay.
Now we have a population of 335 million, and we only have 1 million houses available. So what's happened is...
But available, average inventory. Yeah. Wow. That's a tight market.
And I don't have that slide in this presentation, but what happened after the crash that no one's talked about is the builders got so demolished and wiped out and so timid, we didn't build houses for 15 years.
Right.
Like housing starts and housing formations, the formations have been 20 to 30% higher for the last 15 years. So for the federal government to come in and say, we're going to relieve all this pressure on the housing shortage, like people just started noticing in 2020.
Yeah.
This has been building for 15 years.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
so I think we're going to have a supply issue for quite a while. I think we're going to have an inflation issue for quite a while. So I think there's a lot of price protection. And I'll get into one other idea of why I think the price protection's there. And this, I'm just going to go off memory. I don't have a chart.
Okay.
So the way you're going to see price damage in the market is a bunch of foreclosures. And so this is how this phenomenon works. So in the crash of 2008, the banks kind of learned their lesson, but the banks foreclosed on everybody, right? Yep. So you'd have a $200,000 asset that the bank would sell off for 50 grand just to get it off their.
Get off the books.
Yeah. And this is what nobody was talking about. Everybody was like, real estate's toxic. And this is where people really made generational wealth. So the appraiser, when an appraiser goes out, he looks around a quarter mile of similar houses, and he has to say, okay, this house is like that house. And so if you had a bunch of $200,000 assets that got sold at trustee sales for $50,000, what's the appraiser have to say that house is worth?
Well, sure.
50.
Right. Okay.
So even though
Yeah.
you could see, like I remember looking at this, with just replacement cost alone, you could see the house, to build the house would be $140,000.
Right.
And the bank selling it for 50.
50.
And then the appraiser is working that into his next appraisal. The banker wasn't saying this was a foreclosure, or the appraiser wasn't saying this was a foreclosure or not a foreclosure. The banker was saying, the appraiser was saying, oh, I have to follow these rules or I'll get in trouble like I did after 2008. And so that's why the value of real estate went down in those years.
Sure.
So the lesson learned is, and I think the banks learned this lesson, is don't foreclose on everybody at once because your whole balance sheet will get ripped apart.
Yep.
But when you're going to see price damage in real estate when the foreclosure rate goes skyrocketing. And then there is no evidence. Like I used to have buddies in the business, they could make all their money on foreclosures.
Right.
We get like a foreclosure lead a month now.
Yeah.
And like there's an argument to be made that there's not enough foreclosures, there's not enough people moving out of houses, and that's why, younger people can't get houses anymore.
Sure.
So for the long 10-year future, there's plenty of evidence saying there's a lot of price protection.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Huh.
And we could do it in another episode, and I'll show the data. But you have to have a huge rate of foreclosure to see price damage in real estate. Because, like we said in other episodes, really it's going to, at a minimum, keep pace with inflation.
The question I was thinking about just a minute ago is, is it easy to say, well, the banks just shouldn't foreclose? Like, don't they have their own books that they have to manage?
Yeah. It's not. The lesson learned is it's not intelligent to foreclose in mass. So that's why you saw during COVID, the banks started doing mortgage workarounds. I forget whatever they call it.
Yeah.
They learned the lesson, like, hey, we don't want to just hammer everybody right away.
Right. Cool.
So what do you think? Do you think that's some decent evidence of why? I'm not saying it's going to be like crazy generational returns of appreciation.
Right.
That's where I think people get in trouble. It's like, no, it's going to do 5% a year. 10 years, you're going to look back and like, wow, I really like those returns.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a line of credit or I'm going to sell these houses, and that's how I'm going to recapture my investment.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, like you said, last 70 years, don't bet against the champ. and then there's reasonable expectation that, it's not going to be too impacted based on these couple factors you just went through.
And then let's say it's only a 2% return. I should run these numbers, but this is what's great about the 4 pillars. That let's say the house doesn't go up in value at all.
Okay.
The tenant is still going to pay down 80% of your mortgage. That's still a 400% return.
Yep.
If you could get you have $100,000 house, it's really a 500% return. You put $20,000 down. The tenant, it's a 400% return. The tenant is going to pay off the other 80%.
Right.
And so that's making 80 on 20 is what? That's 400%.
Yeah.
So that's where it goes back to, you never play a game, you can only win in one way.
Right. Yeah. And presumably inflation is still going up. The cash flow gap is occurring. You're winning multiple ways.
No, never play a game, you can only win one way, Jake.
I like it.
All right, so I think
which
that's
leads into the next episode, right?
Yeah, so next episode, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite ones, leverage. We're going to get into a favorite topic of yours, usury, things of that nature. We're going to talk a little bit of history because it's important to understand history with lending. And
awesome.
If you're interested in getting these cash flowing hedges against inflation that appreciate 5% a year and you have 70 years worth of data to support that, click the link in the show notes to get on a call with one of my team members. And then if you like the podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. And let's grow the Main Street Patriot podcast.
Let's go.
All right, see you on the next one, guys. So if you like what you heard today and you want to learn more, sign up for a discovery call with one of the Vreeland Capital success coaches at jimmyvreeland.com.